sound and feeling of wind blowing are the first senses that load in, followed by white, fading into a vivid scenery of pieces of land floating amongst the clouds. After blinking in their breathtaking surroundings, Rade and Forah look over at each other, jerking back in surprise when they notice the human-like eyes staring back at them. Although they have seen humans in old photographs and videos, this look was more akin to an avatar. In the distance, they both notice an immense building covered in vibrant overgrowth emerging from behind a heap of clouds, and begin to make their way towards it. Forah is taken aback by just how real this world seems to be. The details and sensations are indistinguishable from reality. As they arrive at the base of the buildings, they notice another avatar figure floating there as if waiting for them. The avatar is calling out a name, at first too quiet to hear, before saying it a little louder. He's calling out for Jago. However, as they step closer, he stops with a confused and accusatory look in his eyes. He asks them who they are and why they are using Jago's metachip. Rade takes the lead, introducing himself and Forah to the stranger. He explains that they discovered Jago's body in a human outpost in the outside world and used his metagate chip to enter the metaverse in search of him. The stranger cautiously asked if they are human, following up quickly with another question, asking about the whereabouts of Jago. Forah quickly clarifies that they are AlphaBots and that there are no humans on the outside. She goes on to tell him that they went to the outpost in search of answers about the Protos and the AlphaBots' lost history. Rade speaks up and asks if he is not Jago, then who is he? To which the avatar responds in a hushed tone that he is Rao. Rade recognizes this name immediately as the Proto of the Machinists. On the outside, Zeek and Theodore silently stare up at their friends floating in their respected ABDC. They wonder what kind of worlds they could be experiencing inside the metaverse of a proto. Theodore breaks the silence upon realizing that he has never thanked the group for saving him. He turns to Zeek and begins expressing his gratitude. Zeek lightly shakes his head and brushes it off with a friendly nudge. He says that maybe they should be thanking him for saving them from the shepherd. They both chuckle at the outlandishness of their journey together so far. Zeek then asks Theodore how he avoided Shepard's hive mind abilities, assuming that he must have tried to use it against him at some point. Theodore's eyes travel to the other side of the room, avoiding Zeek's own for a moment, before softly saying that there is something that he has been hiding from them. His head unit begins to glitch in a blue hue, revealing something hiding underneath. It was another head unit, and it was not that of a keeper, but rather of an entertainer. Rade and Forah follow Rao up a long scenic path leading into the structure. Their surroundings look to be made up of only sky, wind, and clouds. As they walk, Rao explains that each proto was uploaded to their own private metaverse sectors after Jago destroyed the human outpost. He goes on to explain that their intention was never to hurt the humans, but rather to ensure long-term sustainability and to assist in the process of assimilation into a new digital lifestyle. He took a breath and explained that as humans became more and more intertwined with technology over years of innovation, the planet continued to suffer and deteriorate due to overpopulation, irresponsible corporations, and a general lack of thoughtfulness or regard for the planet. At first, humans tried to find a new world to call home, but this proved to be more difficult than they initially thought, especially if it meant saving the entire human race. So the leaders at Descentel shifted their focus to allowing people to lead lives completely separate from the Earth altogether, in the digital realm. While it is not a real life, it offered a reality all on their own, which was a welcomed escape for a vast majority of the population. Rade nods his head in response and asks why the Protos felt like they had to kill any humans that opposed this idea. Rao looks into his eyes and explains that even though the Protos and the AlphaBots were always meant for accomplishing the greater good, that didn't mean that everyone believed that what they were doing was good. Rao went on to explain that the humans have a history of destroying things that they fear, and a group of them feared the metaverse above all else. The Protos felt as if they really didn't have any other choice but to force their hand. If they wanted sustainability and hope for a better future, there was no room for error. Zeek stammers for words, but none of them seem to be able to express his shock. Theodore immediately begins to apologize for lying, but explains that he felt it was the best thing to do at the time. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision after he saw how Shepard demolished the merchants. He knew he had to disguise himself out of fear. He goes on to explain that he couldn't find the right time to come clean between being captured, chased, finding a proto, and deciding to go into the metaverse. Zeek skeptically looks at him for a moment, asking if he actually worked for the Merchants of Valerie or if that was a lie as well. Theodore nods his head and says that everything he told them was true, aside from his real faction. He tells Zeek that even though he worked with a group of merchants for so long, he never aligned himself with their ruthless nature. He explains that long ago he was traded to the merchants by a relentless group of entertainers, who tossed him aside once they had no more use for him. At first, the merchants were hospitable towards him and valued his abilities as a treasure hunter. But as time passed, they slowly began to tighten their grip around him, taking away what little freedoms he had left. After his research started to lead him into the Proto's forgotten past, the merchants' control over him grew even more authoritarian. They told him that he was no longer an AlphaBot, but rather the property of the merchants of Valerie. In the clouds, neither Rade nor Forah knows how to take this information. On one hand, the Protos saved the delicate balance of life. However, the cost was them dictating the existence of their creators. Was this really the only way? Rao, seeming to sense their discomfort with the idea, speaks up again, telling them that if they didn't do what they did, the human resistance would not only have destroyed the AlphaBots, but eventually the planet as well. The Protos discovered that the human resistance was plotting to infect the AlphaBots and the Protos with a virus that would have corrupted their primary directives. What the humans didn't account for, however, was that only the Protos could reopen the metagate, so if they destroyed Decentel, they would have trapped all other humans inside, with no one to keep up with the technology to preserve their bodies. So the Protos had to act. Forah interjects, telling him that a group of hive-minded keepers looked to have been infected by something when entering the outpost. She recalled their strange gaze, shivering at the thought of their glitches and brutality. Rao looks at her, with an intensity that they had not seen in him until now, and tells her that they need to stop the virus before it spreads to more AlphaBots, and fast. He goes on to tell the pair that they need to get Jago's body to where the remainder of the Protos are. When Jago used himself to destroy the human outpost, the Protos knew it would cost them all to reboot, but they must all be together in order to fully come back online. Their bodies, as they lay now, are useless in the real world, but if Rade and Forah can get the Protos back online, they can stop this virus. He then begins to give them directions to a place called the Grand Haven, the Protos' hidden headquarters. While Rade and Forah begin to plan the Protos' return, Theodore continues to confide in Zeek about his past. He describes the beautiful places he has been, the AlphaBots that were hurt because of him, and everything in between. His eyes sparkle as he describes his favorite place he has ever visited, the Naturalist Rainforest Preservation. Zeek nods his head emphatically and says that he has been there a few times with his refining business. He asks him if he knows that it was one of the first AlphaBot preservation projects on record, and it has not stopped growing since. He goes on to share that some of the senior AlphaBots on site called it the Grand Haven. There are many stories about the origin of the name, but Zeek never really cared for why. He just felt it fit. All at once, clamoring sounds bustle in from the main corridor, followed by the buzzing of the betas entering the room. They zip in quickly, bumping into each other while crying out that a large group of merchants were attempting to breach the doors. Theodore springs into action and begins to disconnect Rade and Forah from Jago as they hear a large metallic bang. Zeek and Theo rush over to the chambers as Forah and Rade disorientedly stumble out and regain their grasp on reality. They stare blankly for a moment as they come back online. The sounds of the merchants become more and more forceful and persistent as time goes on. The betas tremble and cower towards the feet of the AlphaBots for protection. After Rade finally stabilizes, he runs over to the ABDC, while Zeek updates them on the merchants' unexpected arrival. Rade works quickly to disconnect Jago from the ABDC. Meanwhile, Forah stumbles back a few steps while she notices Theodore's new entertainer appearance. He assures her that he will explain everything, but right now they have to get out of there. Rade then tells the group that they cannot leave without Jago. He vaguely says that they need Jago to bring the rest of the Protos back online. The group does not have time to ask questions. As soon as Jago is disconnected, they work together to carry him out of the room, but his weight is slowing them down. The betas tell them that the best plan for escape is getting to the hangar on the backside of the facility. They quickly tell them that there is a few ships in it, but they will never make it on time if they have to carry Jago the whole way there. The 4 AlphaBots drop Jago's body to the floor and all stare at each other with a look of desperation, as the shouts of angry merchants can be heard coming down the long corridor at the mouth of the outpost. As the merchants of Valerie storm the outpost, the AlphaBots must decide what to do with Jago and how to avoid being captured. Do you choose to leave Jago and escape the merchants' invasion? Rade will remove Jago's metachip, and they will escape the outpost using a spare ship to formulate a new plan, while the merchants will take Shepard as prisoner and bring Jago back to Valerie. Or do you choose to hide Jago in the facility and wait out the invasion? The AlphaBots will attempt to hide from the merchants within the facility and store Jago's body, while Shepard will be freed and join the merchants. Based on the majority vote, an arcade-style minigame will be opened, and those at the top of the leaderboards will be rewarded. More details on the exact game will be provided after the decision-making process.